Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co. Coming up tonight, there is a row about where to place migrants. When is there not, quite frankly? But anyway, this one centres around a barge in Dorset. Some saying it's the ideal place, others saying it is cruel and it is inhumane. What says you? And the row rumbles on, doesn't it? About what is gender, what is sex and all the rest of it. Kemi Badenoch apparently is mulling over whether or not to change the Equalities Act to state very clearly, categorically, that sex means biological sex. Will that settle the argument, the debate, once and for all? And speaking of it, of which, can you actually change your biological sex and become from one to the other? Your thoughts, please. And Keir Starmer, he has been in his post for 3 years. Do you reckon he's going to be our next Prime Minister? I've got all of that and more, including, by the way, one of the bosses of the biggest teachers' union who says that the strikes are not just about pay. I mean, you could have fooled me, but anyway, it's about, apparently, the state of the brutal, racist state that is the UK. You what? Goodness me, I'll have all of that and more, but before I get into it, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister's defended plans to house asylum seekers on a barge in Dorset, claiming it will save the taxpayer millions of pounds every year. The government's confirmed a deal has been signed, despite the threat of a legal challenge from the local district council and Tory MPs. The Bibby Stockholm, which can accommodate around 500 people, will provide basic but functional facilities and it will have around-the-clock security in an effort to minimise disruption to the local community. Rishi Sunak says the government's taking a fair approach to tackling illegal migration.
We're spending as a country £6 million a day housing illegal asylum seekers in hotels. That can't be right. I've committed to reducing that number, moving asylum seekers out of hotels, and that means we need to find alternative sites, and including barges like the one we've brought forward today. That's going to save the taxpayer money, reduce pressure on hotels.
21 people have been convicted of sexual offences against 7 children in Walsall who were younger than 12 when they were abused. West Midlands Police says the offences were committed over a period of almost 10 years. 3 trials have been held over the past 15 months, with reporting restrictions in place until the conclusion of those trials. The offenders will be sentenced next month. A man has admitted killing his wife and children in Northamptonshire. Saju Chelavalil, excuse me, has pleaded guilty to the murders of Anju Ashok, as well as 6-year-old Jiva Sanju and his sister Janvi, who was 4. They were found with serious injuries at a house in Kettering last December. Despite efforts to save them, Miss Ashok died at the scene and their children died later in hospital. Nicola Sturgeon's husband, Peter Murrell, has been arrested in connection with an investigation into the SNP's finances. Detectives have been searching the party's headquarters, collecting evidence, and a cordon has been set up outside the couple's house. Police Scotland has been investigating the spending of around £600,000 set aside for the independence campaign. Mr Murrell resigned as the party's chief exec last month. Scotland's First Minister, Hamza Yusuf, says the SNP is cooperating with police.
Will have questions. There will be some concerns. Our party membership, of course, will have concerns too. So what I can commit to is party leaders that we want to be absolutely transparent. That's why I asked NEC to agree to a review around governance and transparency, and also to make sure it has some external input, which I think is really, really important to give confidence, not just to our party members, but to anybody in the public that might have some concerns too.
The chairman of the blood inquiry says compensation for victims should be extended as some family members remain unrecognised. Thousands of patients were infected with HIV and hepatitis C through contaminated products in the 1970s and 80s. An independent inquiry set out its second interim report. Last year it recommended victims of the contaminated blood scandal receive interim compensation of £100,000. The inquiry chairman, Sir Brian Langstaff, has described it as the biggest treatment disaster in the history of the NHS.
My conclusion is that wrongs were done at individual, collective and systemic levels. Today is an important milestone on the journey to establish what happened and why, to learn the lessons of the past and to make amends as much as we can as a nation.
Well, 2 victims of the scandal have said the report proves there were questions to answer.
We all welcome Sir Brian's interim report. I think it covers everything that all of the groups have been saying over the years. And it's good to see that we are now being believed and we're not hitting our head up against a brick wall as we have done in the past.
They were wronged, we were wronged, all the families were wronged, and that has to be put right. And the financial packages set down by Sir Brian today goes in some way to right that wrong.
Raids have been staged across the UK as part of an international cybersecurity sting. The National Crime Agency estimates the personal data of tens of thousands of Britons was stolen by website Genesis Market, which has now been taken offline. 80 million sets of credentials had been illegally acquired from sites including online banking, shopping and social media, and were being sold for as little as 56 pence. Digital fingerprints from victims' devices were also on offer. 24 suspected users of the site have been arrested in the UK. And Donald Trump is calling for the Department of Justice and the FBI to be defunded, claiming law enforcement in the US has been weaponised. The former president has pleaded not guilty to 34 criminal charges of falsifying business records, as well as covering up hush money payments during his 2016 election campaign. He's innocent and that he's a victim of election interference. This is GB News. Now it's over to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Aaron. And gold medal to you. He suppressed his cough, so he did all the way through that. I'm very, very impressed with him. Anyway, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight alongside me, John McTernan. He's a political strategist and former advisor to Tony Blair. And Dewbs and Co's viewers' favourite.
I am.
Oh, they love you, John. Oh, ho, ho.
I've got stuff for them tonight. I've got some good opinions, popular opinions.
Right, so you might, what it means is you might want to take your blood pressure tablets now, everybody.
This is a brutally racist country.
Well, yeah.
Get that on the record.
That's what the boss, or one of the bosses of the largest teaching union reckons. He says that the UK is a racist state. I mean, goodness me. Anyway, alongside John, we've got David Curtin, the leader of the Heritage Party. Welcome. I've not seen you for a while. Welcome.
Thank you.
You know the drill as well, don't you, on Dewbs & Co? It's not just about us three. It's very much about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? Get in touch with me. All the usual ways. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Or you can tweet me if that's your thing, at gbnews or at Michelle Dewbs. Right. Shall we get into our top story? Of course, there is a row brewing. I have to say, there always is, because I don't understand what the end point of this will be, because it's such a divisive topic now. What am I on about? Of course, I'm on about the people that are crossing the channel, because plans are afoot now to house 500 of these channel crossers in a barge on the Dorset coast. But it's caused uproar, so it has, with the local community and the local MP. They're saying that they're going to push back through any legal route possible in order to stop this. It's been called cruel and inhumane and all the rest of it, David Curtin. Where do you stand?
I don't think it's cruel or inhumane at all. I mean, the people who will be housed there, if they actually ever go there, will be getting free accommodation, free food, free healthcare, welfare payments as well, just like if they were staying in a four-star hotel or they've been put in a home, which could, you know, go to someone else on the council house list. But honestly, I don't think this is going to do much at all to solve the bigger problem, because they're talking about this barge off the Dorset coast, which can house 500 migrants. But there's 50,000. There's 50,000 in hotels around the country. So that's only 1% of the people that are currently in hotels. So you put 500 there, 500 are going to come across the channel in the next few days. So it is only a very, very tiny scratch on the surface. And I think it's a gimmick before the local elections, and they seem to be quite good at doing these kind of things.
What are you on about, John? You're saying you think it's a gimmick as well?
Look, I think it's a gimmick. I think exactly as David said, this is part of the local election campaign. This is not a government strategy. 500 people come in 2 or 3 days, probably 3 days at the moment. And David's absolutely right. There's 100,000 people in the waiting list for their applications to be considered. Why not do them quickly? Why not have all that time you're spending on finding a barge, commissioning a barge, arguing with local MPs, local people, you should put the barge in Portland or wherever. Spend the time getting civil servants to do more than 4 cases a week. 4 cases a week. You have to get through this in some way. And as you know, as your viewers know, I'm in favour of an amnesty for the 100,000 in the backlog, just to clear it and start from scratch, because something's got to give. And at the moment, it's our system, it's local communities, it's the border security. Nothing the government is doing is more than a headline, and it's only to distract attention from the real crisis, and they've got to deal with the real crisis.
I'm fascinated that your solution is, let's have this amnesty, all you guys in the queue, right, in you go, no checks and balances, I can only assume with your little strategy, in you come. Why wouldn't you go the opposite way? And you could say, right, OK, recently, the primary nation in terms of the volume of people, they're coming from Albania. Well, Albania is a safe place, so I'll tell you what, I'll do a mass rejection of you lot. That's a big chunk out my backlog gone. Why won't you do it that way instead?
It's a small proportion of the total 100,000 are actually from Albania. There's an agreement with Albania. I'm happy to see Albanians dealt with quickly under the agreement. A lot of the Albanians, the handful, I suppose, that have been processed so far, of them that have been processed, a large number have got the right to stay. There's all kinds of issues around. But look, the thing is, the government have let this grow, not just the backlog. How many people have been deported? How many people who've refused had their claim refused, have been deported back to the countries they came from? Hardly anybody. The system's broken at every single level, and I think until the government are honest about that and find an honest solution, not just a headline-grabbing initiative, none of your viewers, nobody will have any faith that the system can work.
Well, I mean, the solution is to stop the boats coming in the first place. They shouldn't be letting the boats actually arrive on the shore on the south coast and actually going out and proactively trying to escort them to Dover. You know, because if people are coming from a safe country, they're not genuine asylum seekers or refugees. If they come through not just one safe country, but a number of safe countries, and they're coming to the UK because they know if they get here, they're going to be rewarded, as I said, with healthcare, welfare, accommodation, food, and all these kind of things.
One thing I agree with David about is we should be actually stopping people coming from France. Let's do the processing of the claims in France itself. I can't see how you can safely, on one of the busiest shipping channels in the world, do anything to interdict the boats. Once the boats come into British water, and which is halfway across the channel, which is 10 miles or whatever from the French coast at some points, then they have to be treated in Britain. Let's get people processed in France. If they have the right to come to Britain, they can come. If they have to wait, they should wait in France. And if they don't have the right to come to Britain, they should go back to the...
But in the meantime, though, while all of those kind of things are going on, because setting up processing facilities takes time, doesn't it? All the rest of it, whatever. So, but surely, though, just from a money perspective, you must applaud the government for trying to find more cost-effective places to put people than 4-star hotels.
Well, it goes back to David's point. This is 500 out of a backlog of 100,000. It does nothing really to dent the costs.
It does.
And for 1% of the people, because the cost of hiring this boat, you've then got the cost of mooring it, you've then got the cost of staffing it, and then you've got the cost of the food on top of it. So actually, what the saving is compared to the average cost of the residents that people are in at the moment, like the ones in my local area, I don't think there's a big difference in this.
There's a huge difference.
It's the numbers that cause this.
Just to be clear on this numbers thing before we come back to you, David, just to be absolutely clear, you've got 51,000 people there or thereabouts in hotels at the moment, costing there or thereabouts £6.2 million a day. That works out an average about £121.60 per person per day. If you put them on the barges, it works out £40 per person per day. So about 3 times.
Plus other costs.
No, the cost for these barges are apparently £20,000 a day.
Not including the staff or the mooring costs or the food costs. So there's other costs on top.
There are other costs as well. But even if you take that number, you're going down per person from 120 to £40 a day. That's £80 per person. Times that by 500, you get about 40,000. So 40,000 is only a tiny fraction of 6.2 million. The costs will go down from 6.2 million to 6.16 million. And then if you just get another, 360 or so come across the channel, then
there's not a lot of these barges around. There's not a lot of these.
Well, I actually applaud the government for being creative in their thinking and attempting, at the very least, to try and save the taxpayers' money.
£40,000.
Well, £40,000 is £40,000, £20,000 a day, £40 a person, £40 a person versus 120 odd quid a person per day. In a lot of people's minds, it'll be a lot of money.
The actual solution is to stop the boats from coming, because until they stop the boats from coming, then the costs are just going to keep on escalating. And this is only a very small number of people.
There was a time a few years ago when Home Office civil servants were really productive. They did 13 cases a week. If you do 13 cases and 80% of them, as the normal number, get allowed to stay as asylum seekers, refugees, they could then be working. And if those people could be working, then they could be paying tax and national insurance. And there's tax that we're not getting from people who could be working. They could be working in the NHS, they could be working in social care, they could be working in hospitality. There's labour shortages everywhere. So everybody hurts out of this. And I agree, we should be trying to save taxpayers' money. But I think, you need to save taxpayers' money at every point of this. Getting people not to cross the channel at all, get them processed in France. Getting people processed quickly. not keeping them in detention, not keeping them in hotels, and getting them
I
into
do
the
find it
workforce.
fascinating, just my last point on this, my last little reflection. Everyone sits there and says, let's stop the birds. But then the second that anyone seems to come up with a deterrent that perhaps would actually perhaps stop people getting on those boats in the first place, immediately everyone's up in arms going, whoa, you can't stop them that way, that's awful, it's cruel, it's inhumane. But they don't then really seem to follow up with many of their own suggestions to stop them in their own minds. Anyway, let me move on to this union boss. He is soon to be the president of the NEC, which is one of the biggest teaching unions. You are, well, you're certainly a former teacher. Do you still teach?
I don't teach at the moment. I lead the Heritage Vardy full-time, but I was a teacher for 20 years.
So you're a former teacher, and I'm interested in your view, particularly on this, because it's all about the teachers' strikes. He's saying, or he has said, that it's not all about pay. They're not just going out on strike because of pay. He says it's about, among other things, resetting our professional control, taking back control of an educational system, get this everybody, from a brutally racist state that sends refugees to Rwanda.
That's absolute nonsense, isn't it? I mean, this is just another person who's, like, trotting out the same narrative from the far left. Oh, Britain is a racist country, and they're really activists who have got into these roles in these institutions, unions. There's a lot of them in education, but there's a lot of people who are just normal teachers, and they might be striking at the moment because they want a pay rise, which is in line with inflation, because, of course, the government's lost control of the economy and the value of the pound. So I would agree with you on that, probably. But, you know, most of the teachers who are striking, and some of them will agree with him because they are activists, but a lot of them will say, well, this is just nonsense. It's what his statement about Britain being a racist country, again, it's got absolutely nothing to do with teachers' pay. It's got absolutely nothing to do with teachers or students or children or pupils or teaching and learning. It's just an opportunistic moment he's taking to actually throw this accusation of racism at the country again.
I mean, calling the UK a brutally racist, and I'm directly quoting his words, by the way, hence I'm reading them, so I don't want to misquote him, a brutally racist state that sends refugees to Rwanda. That is just laughable.
He said brutally racist state, partly about Child Q, the case of the young woman who was strip searched by the police at school. That was racist. It was child abuse. There's everything to condemn about that.
Yeah, but hang on, that was what the event was. But I'm reading his sentence. It's about taking back control of an education system from a brutally racist state that sends refugees to Rwanda. He goes on to say, these strikes, it's much more about the issue, it's much more than just about the issue of pay, it's about reorganising society where we're free from racism and free from oppression.
Yeah, the National Education Union, the successor body to the NUT, the National Union of Teachers, they've traditionally had a strong left wing in them. This man's a member of the Socialist Workers' Party. I don't agree with his politics, don't share his politics. I think it is a fair comment to say this government, the current government, acts in a brutally racist way. And that's their intention.
You think that's a fair comment?
I think it's a fair comment on Suella Braverman, who went to Rwanda and cackled like Cruella de Vil about the housing that she thought refugees should be sent to. I think sending people from our country, where we have a responsibility to refugees, sending them to Rwanda, that is racist. The fact that there's no safe route for these refugees to apply to come to the UK, the fact that actually this country seems to only want this government only seems to want blue-eyed refugees from
there's
Ukraine.
so much I could pick up on this. Right, let me just be clear. So you're saying that Suella Braverman, whose parents are immigrants herself, who's married to a Jewish person, you're saying that she is essentially, if you're saying that she is setting up all these policies that are racist, then are you suggesting that she's racist?
I'm saying that her policies are racist. Judge people by how they act, by how they act.
And what's racist?
I can't look into her soul, but I know that what she intends to do is to punish refugees and asylum seekers who are people of colour, who come here and have no other way to apply to come to Britain.
So by sending people that are leaving France because they're apparently terrified for their life in France, they're coming here and this government is providing them with safe shelter within the government or within the country of Rwanda, and you think providing that safe shelter and all the rest of it is racist?
People come here because they worked in Afghanistan, they worked for our country, they worked for our soldiers, they're under the threat of death from the Taliban. They come here, they want to rejoin family members, and we say absolutely, you cannot rejoin your family, you can't join up your family. One of you is going to go to Rwanda, or two of you are going to go to Rwanda. You can't join your family, your community,
John,
and I think that's wrong.
You have the Afghanistani resettlement scheme, I think is its correct title, and we proactively try and help people from Afghanistan. I don't think it goes far enough. I would agree with you on that. But we all know that this process and the suggestion about Rwanda is to act as a deterrent to stop people predominantly coming from places like Albania. So I just find this whole label, oh, it's all racist, it's cruel and all the rest of it, it's just a smear designed to shame people into agreeing with the opposite side of the argument. I've got to say, I'm afraid it doesn't wash with me, John McTernan. You tell me at home whether or not it washes with you. Is the UK, and I'm checking back because I do not like to misquote people, is the UK a brutally racist state? This world's gone mad, I tell you. Right, I'm going to take a break. You give me your thoughts on that. GBviews at gbnews.uk is how you reach me, or Twitter if that's your thing, at Michelle Dewbs. Don't go anywhere, and I'll see you at 2 for some more of your reaction on that. But also, as well, lots to get into tonight, including Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, and Kemi Badenoch's new plan about, is it finally the answer to this whole conversation about can people change their gender and their sex and all the rest of it. See you in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs & Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, John McTernan is political strategist and a former advisor to Tony Blair, and David Curtin is the leader of the Heritage Party. We've been discussing just before the break about whether or not the UK is a brutally racist state. One of my viewers, Mark, he has a good question. He says, can you ask John McTernan then, if it's so racist, why do so many people want to come here then?
Because we're one of the greatest countries in the world, but the policies of trying to deter refugees who are not blue-eyed white refugees from Ukraine, those are racist policies. And you said yourself, Rwanda's meant to be deterrent. It's not meant to be a nice place to go. People want to come here because Afghanistan, Eritrea, Somaliland, a lot of places have a historic connection to the UK, and because their families are here and because they believe in the freedom that we stand for. And it's the policies of the government, not the great country of Britain, that I'm opposed to.
OK. Are you trying to itch your way back in there?
That's completely not racist. I mean, there are, as you said, there are schemes to bring people from Afghanistan to the UK and resettle them. I mean, I don't agree with that myself, but we're not a racist country. So you've got people from Ukraine who are white, you've got people from Afghanistan who are brown, both coming in resettlement schemes organised by the government. What they're trying to do is keep out people coming illegally on the boats across the Channel.
I mean, I just find it laughable, really, when people say that you've got a racist government, when you actually look at the makeup of the government and the people that are kind of in charge and their backgrounds and all the rest of it. I just think it's a bit ludicrous. Anyway, that is a conversation that I'm sure we could carry on for a very long time. But you know what? There's other things to discuss, so I shall move on because there's another argument in town. This one is going nowhere anytime soon, it seems. But Kemi Badenoch might have the answer. The question is about, it's all getting conflated, isn't it? Sex, gender, this, that, the other. Well, Kemi Badenoch now is considering whether defining sex as biological could provide greater legal clarity to protect female learning spaces in women's sport. Let me give you a little tip, though, because I think sometimes people hear these kind of stories, they go, oh, God, why are you talking about this? And I talk about this, and this is actually on a lot of the newspapers today as well, front page, I think, of a couple of them, because I think this is such a crucial conversation. I think we're at a turning point in this country, David, and, you know, there are essentially facts that were indisputable not that long ago that are now up in the air, up for grabs. And I think unless you bottom these things out, there'll be groups of people that just will not be safe in this country. On the issue of biological sex and this proposal with the Equality Act, where do you stand on it?
I would go far further. I mean, the Equality Act 2010 has caused so many problems in so many areas since it was became an act and it became law. To free speech, the whole transgenderism thing has enabled that, which I never heard of, really, until about 2015. And when I first heard of it, I thought, this is a joke, isn't it? You know, people saying, like Monty Python used to joke about, people saying men can be women, women can be men. But it's just become mainstreamed. And now you can find yourselves in front of the courts just for not saying somebody's pronouns or somebody feeling as though they're offended by you saying that there's just two sexes. But, you know, where I stand on this is that there is no such thing as gender which is different to sex. This is a social construct that comes out of left-field universities developing critical theory since the 50s and 60s, and then this is just a crazy idea that has no basis in reality. But with the Equality Act, what Kemi Badenoch is doing, I don't think is actually going to make too much difference, because there are 9 or 10 protected characteristics of which you're not supposed to discriminate on the basis of. One is sex, another one is gender reassignment. Now, sex means biological sex anyway, so if she just changes sex to biological sex in the Equality Act, it isn't going to make much difference to what it means, unless she gets rid of gender reassignment as a protected characteristic. And she hasn't said that. So her changing that isn't going to make any difference whatsoever to the practicalities of the law.
I mean, the 19-page letter from Baroness Faulkner, the chair of the EHRC, is very interesting. I read it all. And one of the things which would be the consequence of this is that trans men would be allowed to use women's toilets. Trans men would be in women's wards in hospitals. Trans men could claim discrimination as women, but trans women couldn't claim sex discrimination as women. There's a lot of complicated implications of this, and some of
Do you think you can change your biological sex?
I think you can. You can become a trans man, or you can become a trans woman, and that's why gender reassignment.
But do you think you can change your biological sex?
I don't believe in these essentialist definitions that say you have to have a womb to be a woman, because women who have hysterectomies are actually still women. I think what we are trying to talk about is how do you prevent discrimination? And there are 240, according to the census, 242,000 people who are transgender in the UK. It's 0.5% of the population. A very small number of people. They have rights and they shouldn't be discriminated against. And what Baroness Faulkner says, what the HRC say is, the issue should be considered, and it goes through all the complicated factors. Some of the issues it raises, I don't think are for a government to deal with. I don't think government should interfere in sports regulation. Sports bodies regulate their sports. Cricket's regulated by the cricket body, football by the appropriate authorities. They should decide, and sports authorities are deciding, to move to a situation where people who've gone through adolescence and then identified as women can't actually compete in women's sports. I think that's right. I think it's for the sporting bodies to deal with. And one of the cases, she says it might be that a women-only book club could be accused of discrimination. Again, book clubs are organised by people privately. They're not actually things against which you can seek a discrimination. So some of it's made up and flammed up, in my view.
David?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with that, I mean, you could, because under the Equality Act, what about women-only gyms? They discriminate against men. There aren't really men-only gyms, so they don't exist. What if a woman wanted to join a men-only gym? Would they be able to take them to court or whatever? There's all these kind of legal questions that come up. But essentially, when there is no such thing as a trans woman, and saying trans women are women is just not correct, because they're a man. Men with male reproductive organs, or who had male reproductive organs who had them surgically removed, it doesn't make them a woman. And same with a woman. And what I think is absolutely appalling is that people are going into schools and teaching kids this kind of thing, and girls are getting their breasts removed. And then there's, having breast removal surgery, and then sort of trying to become male. But they're not male, they're still women, and they can never be male. It works both ways. So I think, we need to get away from this idea that gender is something that is real. There is gender dysphoria, which is a severe mental illness, and people need help to get over it, rather than to have this mental illness affirmed and written into law.
And in the end, Kemi Badenoch has asked for advice. The advice is that reforms and changes to the Equality Act should be considered. If they're considered, they have to be consulted on. If they're consulted on and they lead to a decision by the government to change, there will need to be amendments in the law, amendments to the Equality Act. That'll have to go through Parliament. There isn't, in my view, enough time now between now and the next election for this actually to be consulted on and legislated on. So there's a lot of issues to discuss, but at the heart of this, there are a couple of 100,000 trans people in the country who have rights, and they shouldn't lose those rights.
But I do just want to push back on this a little bit, because I hear this pushback all the time. People say, oh, there's such a tiny percentage of the UK that identifies in the census as trans and all the rest of it, so therefore it's a really tiny issue. What I would say back to that is actually, obviously, the census is a historical thing now.
Yeah, that's true.
And what's actually going on, the next census, I will be fascinated by how many people and what that difference is, because you have a narrative, particularly among younger people now, which is that it's kind of trans women are women. If you're a guy, you can just say that you're a woman. You can get your certificate if people could have their way, and therefore you are now a woman. You can. It's almost like, I almost feel like it's as ludicrous as people thinking I can almost put this jacket on, and now, ta-da, I'm a woman, and you're not. And actually, I worry, because a lot of these young people that are struggling, they need help and support in actually, you know, you're a guy, you're not a happy guy, well, let's help you become a happy guy, rather than what I fear is that these children are almost being encouraged to be, oh, you're a boy and you're not happy. Oh, well, guess what? If you say that you're a woman and you do this and you have this hormone and this, then you'll be happy.
I think one thing on which we absolutely both agree is that people who are unhappy should be helped to be happy, and that people who need access to psychiatric support, psychotherapy, mental health services, they should get more of them, and that we should help people to understand what is making them unhappy. There's many, many complicated reasons why people are unhappy. Let's deal with their dysphoria. Let's deal with if they're ASD. Let's deal with their Asperger's. Let's deal with all the things that are complicated about their lives. But let's let, in the end, people choose. And the young people, in my experience, are very open, very tolerant of each other. They look after each other, they support each other's mental health in a way that was certainly not true when I was at school, when I was a young person. And I do think we want people, by and large, to be happy. So let's have a consultation on this. If Kemi puts out a good paper, we could have a consultation.
I want everyone to be happy.
Discussion.
I want everyone to be happy. I want to exist in a happy society, but there are also basic facts, which, you know, it's almost like the emperor's new clothes. People rip up these facts, pretend that they're not a thing, and everyone nods along in agreement. And I worry, where does this end? Because if we're all sitting there and nodding along and, oh, yeah, you can change your biological sex and all the rest of it, what next? Age? Is age going to be a construct that's just made up, and actually a grown fella can self-identify as a 2-year-old? And you might look at your screen and say, oh, shut up, Michelle, you're talking nonsense. But I bet, I don't know, however many years ago, if I'd have said you could change your biology just because you say so, you'd have thought I was ludicrous then.
There's a lot of men who identify as England players.
Well, I'll leave you to ponder. I'll leave you to ponder that one. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, Keir Starmer, 3 years in the job. Do you reckon he's our next Prime Minister or not? See you in 2.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, we'll bring you the latest on the astonishing arrest of the SNP's former chief exec and Nicola Sturgeon's husband, Peter Murrell. Plus, US media superstar Megyn Kelly, who famously clashed with Donald Trump, reacts to the historic charges brought against the ex-president. Join Dan, Tory Deputy Chair Lee Anderson, and more of Britain's top commentators, 9 to 11 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, John McTernan is a political strategist and a former advisor to Tony Blair, and David Curtin is the leader of the Heritage Party. Keep your thoughts coming in. I have to say, there's pretty much no agreement whatsoever with the statement about UK being, a fundamentally racist state. That's good, because it means that you guys are thinking common sense out there, which I like. So that's, literally, I can't find anyone that does agree with that statement at all. Bernard is saying that everything these days pretty much seems to be racist, and everyone. And I think your point there is, when everything's racist, then what is actually racist? Your thoughts, keep them coming in. Philip says, this is all, John's doing a Keir Starmer. He won't say that a man can't be a biological woman. And I think you raise an interesting point there, because it has been 3 years since Keir Starmer took the reins of the Labour Party. There's many polls, never been asked my opinion in a poll ever. I don't even know anyone who has. And every time I talk about polls, I do feel I need to point this out, David, because all these polls, I find them very odd, because I don't know who it is that they're polling. But anyway, apparently Labour 20%, 20 points ahead of the Tories. Starmer's personal ratings, perhaps not so good. Only 1 in 5 Brits apparently consider Starmer to have been a great or good leader of the party. What do you reckon? Is Keir Starmer doing a good job, John? Is he going to be our next Prime Minister, or what?
Look, I think when you take a party that's had its worst defeat since the 1930s and turn it around in just 3 years to have a 20-point lead, you've got to say Keir Starmer's doing something right. And he's been in the poll lead for over 500 days now, and the consistent 20-point lead has been there since Rishi Sunak replaced Liz Truss. So the Liz Truss effect was like a 30-point lead for Labour, but it's settled down at a 20-point lead. And so, yeah, look, yes, there's some people say that Rishi's a better Prime Minister. Thing is, people used to say Jim Callaghan was a better Prime Minister than Margaret Thatcher. Opposition leaders find it really hard to look Prime Ministerial, because they're not in number 10. They're not doing PMQs. They're not meeting world leaders. So I think he's doing a great job, and he will be the next Prime Minister. I think the public have decided it's time for a change, and that comes out of focus groups all the time now. That people just go, it's time to give Labour a chance.
So why do you assume that in your minds, in your ways, the public have decided it's time for a change? And why do you then automatically equate that change to being, right, Labour is a shoo-in?
Because we live in a first-past-the-post electoral system where there's 2 main parties.
And do you think we should?
The Tories or the Labour. Do
you think we should?
Yeah. I'm in favour of strong majorities, give governments that can make decisive actions. I think PR leads to coalitions, and the voters don't get a government they vote for, they get the government the politicians decide they should get.
David Curtin?
I don't see any difference, really, between the Tories and Labour at the moment, or the Lib Dems and Green. And the Greens, I think, what's happening is, if there is a general election now, Labour will win. And that's frightening, because you've got Keir Starmer as the leader who can't properly define a woman, as we said before. But I think the reason why they're in the lead is not because people are flocking to Labour because they're terrible. It's because people are leaving the Tories in droves. Their core voters so disgusted with them because every election they say and sound conservative. They say conservative things. You know, what they're doing at the moment, they're promising to deal with mass immigration and so on. They're coming out with these gimmicks. Last time they said, you know, they're going to make the best of Brexit. But then we've had sort of the lockdown situation. They've been terrible at looking after the economy. They're woke. They're into net zero and climate alarmism, which has ruined our energy supply system, and it's put energy prices up through the roof. So I think a lot of their own voters are just abandoning them now. So they're losing their vote. Their vote is dropping and collapsing. Labour is steady in its vote, but I think people are going to leave them as well because they are so woke and so politically correct that people really are looking for an alternative that is not Tory or Labour.
Are you? Are you looking for an alternative that is not Tory or Labour? Do you think it'll happen anytime soon? We've just been talking about the fact we have a first-past-the-post system. Should we? And is Keir Starmer the man for the job for you? Your thoughts? And I'll come back with those in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, John McTernan is the political strategist and a former advisor to Tony Blair, and David Curtin is the leader of the Heritage Party. We're talking about Keir Starmer, whether or not he's the man for the job, whether you would vote Labour next time. Many of you agreeing with the point that you've just made, David, when you were saying actually there's not much difference between Labour and Tory. I think that's a sense that I'm feeling in my inbox as well. One of the things that sticks in my mind about Keir Starmer, he was asked a really quick-fire question at the end of a podcast, and he was asked Davos or Westminster, and he chose Davos, and I thought that was very odd.
The skiing is great in Davos.
Yeah, but he's not trying to battle out to be the Britain's best skier.
He also wants to
He was
represent...
on a political podcast.
He also wants to represent... I've not heard that podcast. He wants to represent Britain at the highest levels possible, and I think it's important. But look, the thing about Keir is the country's looked at the Tories. He's seen the Tories have failed on the health service, failed on crime, failed on borders, failed on inflation, failed on the economy. They think it's time for a change, and Keir's got policies in every single one of those areas.
Right, let me ask you this. If Labour is the answer, right, to all the country's ills, why is Wales, which is under Labour rule and has been for, 2 decades plus, not this beacon of wonderfulness that we can all look at and go, whoa, look at that, that's what we need?
Because the economy, which drives almost everything, and productivity and growth, which drives almost all our ability to spend on public services, that's determined by the UK government. Wales will only recover economically with a Labour government.
But you're not answering my... But Labour is responsible for so many policies in Wales, including, for example, it could change taxes and all the rest of it if it wanted to. And this is the bit that I don't understand. If Labour policies and all the rest of it was so good, and the answer cannot be as simple as, oh, it's the UK government's fault. Because if Wales is only as good as the UK government, then what is the point in having devolution to Labour then in Wales?
Well, clearly, the Welsh Labour have been in power since devolution. They're still popular. In Wales is going to vote 6 or 7 Tory MPs out at the next election on current polls. So Labour is very popular there. Whatever the Welsh Assembly government are doing is popular with the country. The health service they deliver is popular with the country. The education service they deliver is popular with the country. The skills policies are popular with the country. But Wales will only fully recover in the same way that the places in the red wall seats that need to be levelled up, they'll only recover when there's a proper economy and there's proper
Don't wash with me. It does not wash with me. And no one can ever answer that simple question. Everyone that flies the flag for Labour, whenever I put to them, what about the Wales situation then? Because many aspects of Wales are worse when it comes to performance than England, I never really get a straight answer other than to blame someone else. And would that be the track that you would have if you got Keir Starmer? It's not his fault, it's someone else's fault. I don't know, I'll leave it to you to decide. Let's talk Camilla, shall we? Queen Camilla, just before we head off. She's going to be known, as I said, as Queen, not Queen Consort. Is that the right move?
I don't think anyone really minds, to be honest. I mean, I think she's going to be referred to as Queen, but her official title is still going to be Queen Consort. So, you know, it's much of a muchness, really. I think what concerns me far more about Charles and Camilla is how that they're dabbling in politics more now than what has happened before. You know, and I think they're quite entwined with the World Economic Forum, climate alarmism and net zero and these kind of agendas, which are political. I think they need to stay out of that. And that's far more of a concern for me than whether Camilla's called Queen or Queen Consort.
I think the problem is, you know, we have a monarch, and it's a queen under Queen Elizabeth. It was a queen under Queen Victoria. It's a king with King Charles. The spouse of the monarch isn't a queen or a king. The spouse of the monarch isn't a monarch. We only have one monarch. You can't be a queen unless you are the monarch. So I think it's wrong for her to get the title. Prince Philip was happy to be Prince Philip. Camilla could be a princess. They could give her a title. And I think that would be far more appropriate, because it's not for Buckingham Palace, it's not for the king to choose the title of his consort. It is actually, we have a constitutional monarchy, and the monarchy is there at the will and the wish of Parliament. They were restored by Parliament. They have their pay from Parliament, the civil list. So I think we should keep her as the Queen Consort.
Well, the Palace has said Queen Consort is Camilla's rank, while Queen will be her title. You say that nobody cares, by the way. There's real strong feelings. Helen says it's abhorrent that the woman who broke Charles's marriage and all the rest of it should be now called our Queen. So, and that view is coming through with other viewers as well. So actually, the past is not forgotten for a lot of you. Or maybe you do welcome Camilla as the Queen, and it's time for a brand new start. Look, that is all I've got time for. Thank you very much for your company, and thank you, gents, as well for yours. I am off now. I'm going to a caravan in Skegness, to be precise, for Easter. Can you think of a better treat, a better holiday?
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. There is quite a lot of cloud across the UK at the moment. Outbreaks of rain followed by heavy showers, but it should turn drier from Friday and into the Easter weekend. Low pressure in charge at the moment, bringing that cloudier, wetter weather, but we will see through into Good Friday and into the weekend, high pressure starting to move in, settles things down for the vast majority of the weekend. So this evening, a lot of cloud across the UK, outbreaks of rain pushing slowly eastward, some heavier bursts possible, turning drier into the early hours from the west, but the risk of some heavy showers, particularly over Northern Ireland during the early hours. Temperatures holding up well above freezing due to the cloud and outbreaks of rain, but it means quite a grey start to Thursday morning. We will see some glimmers of sunshine in the north and the west, but this will be also accompanied by some heavy showers. And as we move through the day, the showers will develop, particularly across England and Wales. Some of them could be heavy and thundery at times. Rain continuing to just hold on to the Northern Isles, but best of the sunnier weather across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Temperatures reaching the mid-teens across the UK. Into the evening time on Thursday, we see an increased risk of those showers turning to longer spells of rain across eastern parts of England. But overnight, we'll see clearing skies for the rest of the UK. Under those clear skies, temperatures will start to drop away and we'll see a frost return.